North Dakota State Extension economist Frayne Olson is our market analyst this week. While Nebraska is behind its 5-year average in corn and soybean planting progress, the rest of the country as a whole is not. U.S. farmers have planted 92% of their corn and 61% of their soybeans. Nearly 3/4 of that corn crop is rated good to excellent, according to the USDA's latest crop progress report. We talked with Frayne Wednesday morning about corn and soybean markets, but started in wheat, where prices have recently seen drastic movement in both directions.
There's a combination of reasons. Just like anything, there's always a combination of events that lead to this. First, when we talk about the rally that we've seen the last couple of weeks, really caused by a series of both supply-demand conditions, some concerns about the flooding and the heavy rains that we saw in the Texas and Oklahoma area, the potential for some frost damage here in the northern plains, in particular in North Dakota, and then some dry areas now starting to appear not only in central and western Canada, but reappearing in the Black Sea region. And then add on top of that some of the financial issues where we saw retracement or fallback in the value of the U.S. dollar put quite a bit of strength and lift back into the wheat market. And then we hit the Memorial Day weekend, and guess what happened? All of those things started to turn on us. First, we had the value of the dollar start increasing again. Some economic news came out to suggest the U.S. economy is doing fairly well. And in the same sense, we did not get killing frost, or at least a heavy frost damage in the spring wheat area. Our wheat came through the weekend pretty well. It looks as the extended forecast as we get into central Canada, looks like in the 6 to 10 day forecast they might be getting some rain showers, which would again alleviate some pressure there. And then we're still waiting to see the exact extent of any kind of problems from the flooding and potential disease problems later on in our winter wheat belt, again in particular in Texas and Oklahoma. My suspicion is we're going to be looking more for quality differentials or quality problems rather than necessarily any significant yield losses.
Can you further describe the impact or the strength of the dollar's impact on wheat and corn and soybeans?
Yeah, and that's a common question I get, is the value of the dollar and how does that impact the markets. And obviously as the value of the dollar increases, it makes our products that we're trying to sell into the international market more expensive. And of the major commodities, wheat is by far the most sensitive, simply because there's so much competition in the world market for wheat. We export a lot of our wheat. About 50% of our wheat goes overseas. So the wheat market tends to be very sensitive to changes. Next in line would be the corn market, again because of the competition in the feed grain sector of the world market. Again, exchange rates can have an impact there. The soybean market is impacted by exchange rates, but not to the degree that corn and soybeans are, or the corn and wheat are, excuse me.
As bearish as you were the last time we talked, I assume the lows made in soybeans are no surprise to you?
Not really, and again, unfortunately, when we come back to the supply-demand conditions, it looks like we're going to have another big soybean year. At least that's the expectation in the market right now. So we came off of 2014 with record soybean harvest here in the U.S. We got record soybean production out of Brazil, near record soybean production out of Argentina, and we follow it with increased acreage here for soybeans in the U.S. So right now, as a buyer of soybeans, everybody's kind of sitting back and saying, good planting progress, looks like the weather forecasts are fine. You know, there is no reason to try and put any kind of spark back into the soybean market. We're slowly drifting lower. So even though we broke through the lows that we saw in September, from a technical standpoint, that's kind of psychologically important. But from a supply-demand conditions situation, that's not unusual. And unfortunately, I do expect things to drift lower as we get further into spring.
How do you use that information for 2015 sales?
Well, that makes it a bit challenging. Usually what happens is our next chance for any kind of a rally or any kind of really a weather scare is what we're looking for will come as we get later into the season. We get into mid-July and into August as we get into flowering and later on into pod set. If there ends up to be some drier pockets or some real heat that starts to build over the Midwest, of course that can change the psychology and the expectation for yields very, very quickly. So those would be some of the timing, from a timing standpoint, some of the objectives that I'd be looking for.
Among the three of these, corn has been the most tempered market really in terms of price movement. What are your thoughts on that market?
Well, again, on corn, I think we'll start drifting lower. The key in my mind will be whether we break that September low that we saw from before, from a charting standpoint. You know, there's some debate going on whether that'll happen or not. I do think we're going to be in a trading range again with corn until we start seeing what's happening in the crop development in July and into August. Kind of that same time period when we get into the pollination and cob fill later on. So I think if there is any sparks, it'll really come from some kind of a weather scare somewhere.
Anything to keep in mind before a couple big reports at the end of June on grain stocks and planted acres?
Well, just watch what the traders are talking about. Watch in particular about what the expectations are from some of the private analysts, because that usually sets the tone. And if there are any sparks coming out of those markets or those reports, it'll be because the USDA numbers are different from what the trade and the private analysts are suggesting.
As mentioned, the USDA reports on quarterly grain stocks and acreage are scheduled for release Tuesday, June 30th. The June crop report is slated for Wednesday, June 10th.